Are you a farmer? Then this is for you. Meet the Farmers Virtual Summit taking place from the 25th to the 27th of August 2020. Available on your smartphone, tablet, or computer. Meet the Farmers is a virtual summit and business matchmaking agriculture event where farmers meet their suppliers and buyers. So this is how it works. During the summit, crucial matters affecting our agricultural sector will be discussed in partnership with GRZ and key stakeholders during the plenary and parallel sessions. During the business matchmaking, the event brings farmers from all over the country to meet their suppliers and buyers. Meanwhile, the suppliers and buyers will set up their profiles online to showcase products and services they supply or buy. The farmers are then linked to their suppliers and buyers based on what they farm. They meet online using video link on a one-to-one and one-to-many basis. Register for free now to secure your place on www.meetthefarmerszm.org.
Good morning once more to everybody and welcome to Meet the Farmers Virtual Summit. This is 2020 Workshop 2 on Financing Agro-Business Ventures, Challenges and Opportunities. My name is Namkolo Mangala and I'll be your host for this workshop. The workshop delves into the nature of challenges as well as opportunities available to farmers in Zambia and Africa in terms of finance and financial services. What is the current situation in terms of access to finance for farmers across the country? What are the documented challenges farmers face in this area and what efforts are being made by various stakeholders, including those of the speakers, in addressing these challenges? The speakers will explore the current and emerging opportunities for farmers in accessing finance and financial services, perhaps including insurance and micro insurance for farmers. At this juncture, kindly allow me to introduce my speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Patrick Chimbamlilo, who is a Senior Program Officer at Japan International Cooperation Agency in Zambia. Mr. Chimbamlilo is an experienced program development, management, monitoring, and evaluation specialist with demonstrated experience in university lecturing, research, as well as providing leadership and management in business and development projects and programs.
Good morning all. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secondly, we have Mr. Lois Bangwe. Mr. Bangwe is a Senior Agriculture Specialist at the Zambia Country Office of the Africa Development Bank. He has also worked as Assistant FAO, Country Representative Programs. Mr. Bangwe has spent 2 years of his postgraduate work experience as a research officer with the Center for Development Studies. Mr. Mike Mbulo is a program coordinator at the Rural Finance Expansion Program. Mr. Mbulo is the program coordinator for the Government of Zambia and International Fund for Agriculture Development supported Rural Finance Expansion Program, whose purpose is to increase the access to and use of sustainable financial services by poor rural men, women, and youth. He has also worked in inclusive finance for over 30 years in Zambia and the southern region. Mr. Mbulo, kindly wave to the audience.
Good morning, pleasure to be part of the summit.
Thank you very much. And lastly, kindly allow me to introduce this workshop's facilitator, Mrs. Mukwandi Chiwesakunda from the National Savings and Credit Bank. Mrs. Chiwesakunda was appointed as the first female Chief Executive Officer at National Savings and Credit Bank in January 2018. Having been the first female president of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Finance, she hails with wide experience in various financial service industry roles. Her career journey began as a graduate in Standard Chartered Bank, rising through the ranks to management and directorship roles. During her illustrious career, she has held various executive roles at Stanbic Bank, Access Bank, and the Bank of Zambia. She has also been non-executive board member of Zambia Revenue Authority, Vision Fund, and the Global Fund Country Coordinating Mechanism. To all the participants joining us on Hoover, welcome once more, and please feel free to write your questions or comments in the chat box on the Hoover app. I now hand over to our facilitator, Mrs. Chibesa Kunda.
Thank you, Namkolo, and thank you to all the participants and to our panelists. We have various presentations this morning from the panelists, and I will immediately hand over to the first speaker, who is Mr. Patrick Chibamulilo from JICA. He will take us through some of the challenges and opportunities for farming in Zambia and in Africa, and also what the opportunities are to grow and enhance the participation in the market. So we pass it on to Mr. Patrick Chibamulilo to take us through his presentation. Thank you.
Once more, good morning. I'm sure my presentation should be coming soon, but what I'll look at, there will be 4 items. One, of course, I will just look at the importance of finance and its relevance to agriculture. The second one will be, who are these, when we talk of agriculture, who are the players in agriculture and their financing needs. Then we are talking about the challenges, opportunities, and finally, shall look at recommendations. Okay, so what is finance and its importance to agriculture? We may have noticed that looking at the living monitoring condition surveys, the most recent one shows that 60% of the households depend on agriculture. And however, agriculture, despite having many people, only generates about 11% of the GDP. That shows that there is a problem. There are 60% households of the country, but then only 11% of the GDP. Finance is one of the ingredients that can change some of these challenges that we face. And I think a recent World Bank financial diagnostic study of 2019 shows that finance ranks highly among the needs. And my study also in 2019 shows that with finance, the probability for one to adopt high yielding practices is quite higher than that one without credit facilities. I know finance is a wide area, but I thought I should focus on the key needs, especially the credit side, because finance involves both the savings and also the credit. But I'll focus on the financial needs or credit needs of our farmers, of the sector, if I may say so. Thank you. Now, who are these people in the sector, in the agriculture sector, when we are talking of the agriculture sector? I'll just talk through like somebody who is running through a value chain. At the beginning, you have somebody who supplies the inputs. Then you have the farmers, you have traders. Sometimes we tend to use some names that people don't like, briefcase businessmen, but they provide some good support to the sector. Then you have the agribusiness processors and so on. And of course, there are some financial providers that we shall also look at. Now, what are the issues? The suppliers, of course, provide some supply of the commodity, for example, fertilizer, chemicals, and other things. And they also do some training. They also show you how to use that particular commodity as a farmer. Then the farmer, we have 2 types of farmers. There are those that that have livestock. They have those that do crops, who do land preparation, planting, put fertilizer, spray some chemicals, irrigation, and labor, which is cross-cutting at all levels up to harvesting time. Livestock, we have different types of farmers, poultry, dairy, and so on. I thought I should differentiate farming. And of course, after the farming, you have intermediaries who are maybe traders who buy the commodities from farmers. You can imagine if a miller wants to go and buy from farmers who have 5 bags of maize each, has to run his truck. This household, the next household gets 2-3 bags, and that brings in the issue of very high cost of running business. But if you have an agribusiness, he can stay there. I mean, a trader, he can stay at a place, aggregate the commodities, transport them using some trucks, either hired or their own trucks. And sometimes they also store the commodity. In the process, they mitigate, they bring in they smoothen the market price differences. For example, when they are gluts when you have a lot of produce. But such people may hold a bit of these commodities in storage and then smoothen the price levels. Then you have the agribusiness people that do the processing. They store, of course, they need working capital and so on, and then they do the selling of the processed commodities. Now, what are the challenges that these people have? I will focus more on the needs that relate to their operations. Therefore, in as much as I understand that finance is a wide sector, it involves the savings and some other aspects, as well as credit on the other side, and of course, financial intermediation in between, like the role of banks. I'll look at what these other people, they do. And now the challenges that you find for input suppliers is that sometimes you find they are not able to supply adequate stocks. Farmers will go to the place to buy the commodities, fertilizer, even under voucher system that we've had lately. Find that some stockists don't have this because, one, they don't have sufficient skills to estimate demand. Then second, the issue of capital. They may not have sufficient capital to buy the commodities that are required. On another aspect, you find that they need to train the farmers. They may do this by showing the farmers through demonstrations. These demo sites require money, require fertilizer, require different inputs, require labor. So sometimes they may have some challenges to give the farmers to demonstrate what they are doing. And of course, in some cases, they have technical issues. Farmers, so these are some of the financial needs these people may require. And these can come from different aspects to rectify the situation. Then also farmers, they need some further training, especially to be encouraged in record keeping, how to write a business proposal. For example, they don't have sufficient fertilizer. We need some people like BDS services, business development service providers. Low yield, they don't have sufficient support. Sometimes they engage in risky, perhaps the page behind will explain that, that is page 6, the risky production approach. For example, some recent studies found that only 80%, say among the rice producers, are able to engage in irrigation. That is for a sample that was undertaken among rice producers. So the rest 92%, they just rely on the rains. And if there are some partial droughts, then it means if this person had borrowed, the supplier of credit is also in problems, this farmer is in problems. So we need to have some things that mitigate the risks, like irrigation. The loans also are not, in most cases, most banks tend to, maybe due to fear of risk, the longer it takes, they have short gestation kind of loans. For example, coffee takes 5 years. So most or some banks will not be comfortable to lend for that long. Then aggregators, I think I've alluded to what they need, some funds to buy sufficient commodities. They don't have sufficient logistics support like trucks. In some cases, they may want to hire trucks, but the roads may be in terrible state. And this has an implication on the hiring fee. If I know that my truck is going to go into some rocks and then have a lot of punctures, immediately my hire fee will be very high. So the infrastructure has implications on the hiring fees. Then of course, storage facilities are also important. Okay, we may move on to the next agribusiness. The agribusiness processors and so on, they have challenges sometimes when they're about to get some funds for finance because they don't have long-term plans. For example, it's not always, our borders are not always open. If you want to sell maize to Zimbabwe, where we know there is a shortage, Kenya and other places, you may not have the permit there and then because the government maybe has issues of waiting, not very clear about the food security situation locally. But if we have good projections, I think we can confidently say we are going to sell about so much. So this brings in some challenges, and we cannot have access to profitable markets. Sometimes they also, within the market arena, the export arena, sometimes our borders are opened a bit late. For example, South Africa was able to sell to Zimbabwe and some other countries around March, April. I must mention that at this point, the prices were as high as $250, for example, for maize. But currently, the price is only about $135 per metric ton for maize. So if we had allowed sales earlier for the old stock, I think we can make some better money. So this actually brings in the issue of not doing business as usual. My recommendation here is that perhaps our crop projection should be coming around January, so that by February, March, we already know what we have in excess, and we open the borders for the old stock. And then we don't lose out on the good opportunities to sell at very high prices. Of course, other things that are difficult for them, for the agribusiness processors and so on, we've had challenges of electricity. Electricity is a little cheaper, especially hydroelectricity than diesel and so on. So with the load sheds and so on, it increases the cost and eats into the profit, and therefore makes it difficult for one to pay back the loans. Then also some of the processors I've encountered have said that some supermarkets take, for example, an oil processor, they may have to supply and wait for the next 30 days or so to get their payment. And sometimes this has some challenges on their working capital. Then what is it that the financial providers have? Also financial providers, they seem to have, they face these high non-performing loans. In 2018, according to the World Bank study, which I just mentioned, diagnostic study, up to about 28% of the loans were non-performing, which is above what we expect generally. Then they also have little room to maneuver, maybe due to to the macroeconomic environment, a banker's interest rate is determined by many factors. For example, the inflation, the risk that is involved, and also to have a bit of margin. For those that are doing exchange rate, dollar-rated exchange rate depreciation also comes in, and of course their own costs. So there's some rooms, perhaps little room to maneuver, especially if the inflation rate is high and there's depreciation of the kwacha. Of course, there's also the issue of fiscal deficit, which diverts. This implies that there is some borrowing by maybe some higher authorities somewhere, which affects the funds that are available for the private sector support. We call this crowding out the private sector. So when we are talking about minimizing the fiscal deficits, this is the issue that we are talking about. Limited guarantees, we need to have some providers of guarantees, especially in areas that are deemed to be risky, but may be profitable. For example, somebody is about to start some new enterprise, say perhaps want to be selling some flowers to Europe. You are not very sure what the situation is like in Europe, but you are very sure that this particular project can be profitable. So you need a guarantor for that aspect. And this is where the development partners and so on can come in for the sake of development. Okay, so we have talked about the issues that relate to input suppliers, the farmers themselves, who of course are not a homogeneous group. You have large-scale farmers, small-scale farmers, and medium-scale farmers. And of course, the people that do some work in between. So, now, what are the opportunities that we have? Zambia has a lot of opportunities, and you have a lot of irrigation potential. I think we are using about 30% of the irrigation potential of about 523,000 potential 1,000 hectares which can be irrigated, but we are just using less of that. We have a lot of crops that can grow, and we are growing these crops with a lot of potential to increase yield. In some cases, we say that we are producing below the production possibility potential or possibility curve, which is below the potential. And this in itself tells us that we have enough potential to grow our yield. And sometime I was looking at some data, where someone was arguing that by increasing yield, it may also bring in some higher cost. And therefore, it's like somebody who spends $10 in order to get $1. So perhaps increasing yield might not be correct, but I can assure you that most studies have found that when you increase yield, even profitability to some extent tends to increase. Otherwise, there is some important place where we can also put in your input to a level where we don't lose out. And most of our farmers are still producing, putting inputs at a lower rate than much desired to get more yield. We have enough land, we have some different aspects that are valuable. Then what is our recommendations? Our recommendations is something that I haven't written here, is that let us try to be timely in our decisions in terms of policy and also as farmers themselves. For example, I'm saying that we should be doing our crop forecast by January, so that when the region still needs some maize, some other commodities, we are using the same type of production weather. Malawi, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, we have similar weather, but if we have enough projections as early as January, February, we should be able to sell the stocks that we have without fearing interfering with the food security situation. Food security in terms of storage. Food security is also a big thing. It has the money that you can use to buy food, but usually we tend to look at the stocks of food that are available. Credit guarantee schemes, the macroeconomic environment, the land to be used for collateral. We have a number of outgrower schemes that we can encourage people to get into. There are also some new kind of credit which people can use, both for saving. You can have Airtel money. Airtel money, sorry to mention Airtel, you have of course MTN Momo. You have perhaps Zamtel money as well. But these companies also tend to give some short loans which a farmer can use. For example, his feed has finished and his poor pigs need to be fed. He doesn't have cash. He can just quickly use this Airtel money so that the animals do not go 2-3 days without eating. And then, of course, which would have implications on the production. Let us also learn from the different project financial schemes and perfect them. ZNFU had some schemes like Bunjimi, where they were giving out some equipment, Bima Credit Scheme, Mechanization Fund, and FAO. There are some other schemes that I may not have mentioned now. I think there's also some scheme like Market Connect, which is not a credit scheme, but Market Connect should be a World Bank funded program, but it requires that a farmer must have shown that they have a certain revenue stream. But unfortunately, farmers don't have records to show that revenue stream. And as a result, they have challenges to get to benefit from such kind of schemes that are available. Thank you very much. I hope I've stuck to time.
Thank you very much. Mulilo. That was a very enlightening session. Just to summarize for the participants, Mr. Chibamulilo took us through how 60% of the households currently depend on agriculture, but agri is only accounting for 11% of the GDP. So finance can change this through both the supply side and the demand side. And he went through various challenges around the skills gap, capital gap, and the opportunities through guarantees and hybrid schemes with land as collateral. And overall, we need to learn as a community from what has been successful in the past and apply it. And our expectation is that our next speaker, Mr. Louis Bangwe from African Development Bank, will help us to identify some of these learnings and take us through how we can perhaps build on what the immediate speaker has taken us through. Thank you very much, and I hand over to Mr. Louis Bangwe from African Development Bank.
Thank you, Mukwandi, and good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, audience. We are very privileged to be invited to this summit. We feel that this is a very, very important summit, and the topic at hand is even more important. I'm going to talk about the nature and current situation in terms of the nature and current situation in terms of access to finance in Zambia, the challenges farmers face. In this regard, I will include other players in the value chain in accessing to finance, opportunities and initiatives available to farmers and other players in terms of resolving challenges to finance and financial services. And then I will lastly talk about what the bank is specifically doing to de-risk and expand the opportunities for accessing finance in Zambia. The whole issue starts with financial inclusion. We know very well that finance fuels value chain development, and Patrick elaborated the various players in the value chain that need finance. You cannot grow without finance, and so it is very important that key players in the agri value chains have access to adequate finance. But the problem we have in Zambia is financial inclusion is still very low, and both credit and finance, there are very few players who are active in there. For Zambia to become a middle-income country by 2030, we need to reform our financial systems and to make them more inclusive. Financial inclusion in agriculture is critically low. More than 62% have no access to financial products, according to the FinScope surveys. This is 2009, but even the recent ones are showing similar patterns. Only a handful of financial institutions serve agriculture. Many of them prefer to go to other industries. Agriculture is a slow-moving industry now in their assessment. The bulk, even in agriculture, the little finance that flows into agriculture, the bulk of it goes to a few commercial players. The smallholder farmers, the medium-scale farmers have no access to it. And then this is compounded by the problem of low savings. In terms of the challenges, why is the sector starved of the required finance? The main problem is low productivity. I think Patrick alluded to that. If you don't have good productivity, then that feeds into low profitability and low returns. And so you are not bankable. Most of the banks will shun away from you. Low crop diversification. I think we are always stuck to certain traditional crops, even though there are opportunities elsewhere in the emerging crops and enterprises. So we need to be outward looking in terms of diversifying our crop base. Then agriculture risk. Agriculture is prone with a lot of risks arising from pests, drought, floods, leakages, and all kinds of risks that afflict the farmer and the other players in the value chain. Then the other challenge is the seasonality and price fluctuations. There is a lot of change in the prices of both inputs and outputs. So it's very difficult to plan. And then even for borrowers, it's very difficult to plan the borrowing and the repayments to the lenders. Then we have low savings, meaning that the lenders have little capital to use to on lend to those who require finance. So we need to boost up savings in the sector. Then there is capacity to develop bankable business plans. This surprisingly occurs both among the borrowers, but also among the lenders. Some lenders are comfortable dealing with traditional loan instruments that they are comfortable with, and they are reluctant to venture into emerging enterprises where they are not sure about the risk profile. So this capacity to develop bankable business plans and bankable proposals is a key challenge in the rendering expanded financial services. Then we have the weak asset base. Of course, assets means collateral and other ability to borrow. And most farmers and agribusiness players have low asset base to use as backup in terms of loan financing. Then we have the risk management and insurance. Again, there is very low uptake of insurance products in order to de-risk lending. And so this is an area of concern that needs to be looked at in terms of policy and also strategies. Lastly, we have unpredictable product markets. Again, if the markets are not predictable, it's very difficult for borrowers to plan. It's very difficult for lenders also to find the borrowers bankable. So there is need to stabilize markets in that regard. What are the opportunities available to expand financing to farmers and other value chain players? The advent of digitalization on the market is a very good opportunity yeah, I think everybody has seen on how financial services have expanded due to digital and ICT provision in the financial sector. People are now able to access finance from various non-traditional sources. I think Patrick mentioned some of them. Then enterprise diversification, again, we are seeing a growing interest in non-traditional crops and enterprises. We are seeing more interest in tomatoes, poultry, honey, and all other kinds of enterprises that can give farmers a better return than in the traditional maize and other traditional crops. We have opportunities in agro-technology use and adoption. I think this summit has showcased so much technology available on the market. I was just scanning through some of the photos being posted. There is so much available in terms of technology, and this can help to raise productivity and then profitability and then bankability. There is an uptake of irrigation. Zambia is one of the countries well endowed with water resources and also conservation, climate smart agriculture. There is opportunity in there. A lot has been done in terms of research. We have seen contract and outgrow schemes, which are innovative mechanisms to link producers to aggregators and processors. Again, their lending initiatives are tied to those schemes. And these expand opportunities for farmers to finance their production. Land titling, if we have to improve our capital base, we need access to titles so that the lending institutions can use them to lend. Insurance and microfinance insurance products, capacity for bankable proposal development, partial credit guarantees and other guarantee systems, mobile banking and the transactions, amendments to the Agricultural Act. I think we have talked about this issue for a long time, to introduce warehouse receipt systems and improve the commodity exchange trading platform. This would open opportunities for farmers to borrow against the deposited products in those facilities. Leasing development, for example, if I want to buy a tractor, there should be some leasing, there are some leasing opportunities now where you can get the assets and be able to use from various players. What most important is to improve the environment in the rural infrastructure that would facilitate commerce and trade in rural areas, roads, public markets, factories, laboratories, extension services, ICT and telecoms. This is very, very important, and I'll talk about this later on what the bank is doing to de-risk and create an enabling environment for agribusiness in rural areas. Then building capacity and skills for women and youth. I think we are now seeing women taking up the mantle, and some of the educated youth are now taking up the mantle in agriculture. I think this is the way forward. And then policy incentives for rural-based microfinance, and then PPPs in agriculture. I think we have a lot of idle government public assets that can be managed through infusion of private sector management skills and financing. Next. Now, in terms of what the bank is doing in opening up opportunities for financial services to unlock rural development, our main focus is to create an enabling environment for rural and agriculture sectors. And we feel that if the environment is right, then it will be easier for financial services to flow to the players in the value chains. The bank provides sovereign lending to regional member countries through the ADB, ADF, and the Nigeria Trust Fund facilities. And this money is channeled to the members through sovereign loans that are meant to improve public infrastructure. We have invested heavily in feeder roads, tarred roads, irrigation infrastructure, markets, both livestock, crops, markets. We are doing cassava factories, cashew factories. We are doing storage and warehousing. We are improving telecoms, and then electrification, laboratories, skills, and all these investments in rural areas is making it easier for banks and financial institutions to interact with potential borrowers. So this is what we refer to as the enabling environment, what are to unlock financial services to rural areas. Then, of course, we have helped member countries to invest in public services, extension, research, land allocation and demarcation, technology, insurance, outgrower schemes, and training and policy activities. Thirdly, some of the loans and the resources we have given to member countries like Zambia are channeled through to improve financial services, direct financial services. We lend to other banks. I think Mukwandi is aware that we have interacted within NatSave and other financial institutions. We are a wholesale lender to some of these, including DBZ and CEC. And through CEC, we are providing loans to smallholder farmers, for example, for aquaculture value chain. We have provided about $25 million. That CEC is on lending to all the players in the value chain, in the aquaculture value chain. We have provided, again, through CEC, matching grants for cashew development in Western Province. This money is being given to investors on a matching grant basis. We also provide subsidies, direct subsidies, like distribution of seeds, livestock, and other materials to improve productivity. We are encouraging savings, insurance, and also we provide guarantees to some of the borrowers so that they can on lend. And then the fifth area is capacity building at producer, processor, trader levels, service industries, women and youth levels. We spend a lot of resources to train and build agribusiness, technical and business skills of the various players in the agribusiness value chain. Lastly, we also provide policy advisory services to government in terms of trade policies, PPPs, how to manage them, and then how to manage subsidies, such as the e-vouchers. So all these we feel confident that can help to unlock rural financial services to the agribusiness sector. Before I close, we have another important aspect which I didn't want to emphasize in this presentation, that we have a very big private sector window that finances large-scale private sector for agribusiness. And the conditions for that are a bit, I think they are well known, but we are a wholesale lender, and the banks, financial institutions, large agribusiness companies are able to access loans from on our non-sovereign window. Facilitator, this is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bangwe, for that extensive presentation. I must mention that considering the fact that you've talked about NatSave, we'll follow up with a phone call because both presenters have talked about NatSave products. You've talked about the wholesale lending that we can potentially access on behalf of the Zambian market. And then Mr. Chibabulilo talked about Bunjimi, which is a NatSave ZNFU product. So I think coming out of these sessions, we'll definitely have a partnership opportunity and we'll build on that. Just to summarize what Mr. Bangwe talked about, he emphasized that financial inclusion is critical and there are very few players currently in our market. We need to enhance this. We need to reform our systems because 62% in the agriculture sector currently have no access to financial services, according to a survey that was done in 2009. The main challenges identified are because of low productivity, it's too risky, low diversification, we've focused inwardly, the natural risks, seasonality and price fluctuations, Low savings, traditional financial instruments are not sufficient to cater for this, and unpredictable markets. The opportunities identified, the first one, which we are all fully aware of and we need to harness, digitalization, diversification, mechanization, land titling, warehousing, and commodity exchange facilities, as well as policy incentives. ADB has done something about this with actions to address the various issues in infrastructure, markets, and creating an enabling environment. Thank you very much, ADB and Mr. Bangwe, for that submission. We will take a couple of questions at the end of the session, but just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to take us through their presentation, I'll now hand over to Mr. Mike Mbulo from RUFEB to take us through the third and final presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, and glad to be here and participate in this workshop. I'm going to talk about what the Rural Finance Expansion Program does and how we respond to the needs of the smallholder farmer by providing financial services or indeed intervening in the financial services sector. The Rural Finance Expansion Program is a Government of Zambia initiative supported by the International Fund for Agricultural Development. It was established in 2014 and it's an 8-year program going up to 2022. The main reason for establishing this program is to increase the access and usage of sustainable financial services for poor rural women and men and the youth in Zambia. We target to reach about 140,000 households by 2022. And the program is national, meaning that we would like to be in all parts of this country. We take an approach of intervening at the macro, meso, as well as the micro level. What do we mean by macro? We're looking at intervening at the level of the policy, legislative, as well as regulatory level, so that we're able to create an environment that is conducive for our financial sector players to carry out their activities in the sector. Then we also intervene at a meso level, which is to help the development of an efficient and supportive infrastructure for the financial sector players, both human and also institutional. Then we also intervene at a micro level. This is to actually stimulate demand. This is where demand and supply meet. So we work with financial service providers to support them to develop products and also delivery mechanisms that are appropriate to be able to engage with a smallholder farmer, the micro entrepreneur on the ground. What do we hope to achieve? We're hoping that by the end of 2022, we would have supported the increase of outreach or the increased outreach of financial services in rural areas through financial service providers, including microfinance institutions, and also banks, insurance companies, and other players in the FSPs. We also hope to improve the efficiency in terms of how they actually deliver those services. We are also supporting the development of what we call community-based financial institutions. These are basically savings groups. We are working with savings group promoters so that these savings groups can actually be linked to formal financial service providers and access more services from that sector. We're also supporting, we're hoping that we can, at the end of the day, be able to support the development of new financial products, new delivery mechanisms, as well as new services that support the sector. Some of the interventions that we have done so far, some of the institutions that we're working with include the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Zambia, the Development Bank of Zambia, PACRA, the Association of Microfinance Institutions of Zambia, CCPC, or Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, and also the Savings-Led Microfinance Network of Zambia. With the Ministry of Finance, we are supporting the implementation of a rural finance policy and strategy through support to a unit within the Ministry of Finance called the Rural Finance Unity. This is a unity that is now in charge of overseeing the rural finance policy and strategy implementation, and also is the window that various players in the sector can go to if they have any issues or suggestions that they want to engage with the Zambian government. We're also working with the Bank of Zambia to look at issues of developing an agency and mobile agency banking regulation framework. We are aware that the bank has allowed FSPs to play in this space on an individual basis, but it's important that we actually have a policy. We're also working with the bank to look at issues around credit infrastructure, consumer protection, and also market conduct. We're also working with the bank to look at issues around financial inclusion. This is financial literacy rather. And we're also supporting the bank to develop and be able to conduct the FinScope survey, which provides statistics that are useful for players in the sector to be able to intervene correctly. We're supporting the Development Bank of Zambia to come up with an agricultural refinancing product as a wholesaler. We work with PACRA to help in terms of registering companies. We are aware that for you to access a loan at a bank, you need to be a registered entity. And some of the challenges that smallholder entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs and other small businesses face is that they are not registered. So we support the bank to do roving. We support the PACRA to do roving business registration. We're also working with AMIS. AMIS is the network that brings together the different microfinance institutions in Zambia. So basically to be able to coordinate and be able to be the institution that talks to government in terms of policy and other areas of development, and also capacity building for the various MFIs. We're also working with a CCPC in the area of rural consumer protection and also consumer awareness. Much as on one hand, we are supporting various players to go to rural areas, we are aware that the rural folk can be cheated by various players that go there with different intentions. So we also provide information to the rural folk to be able to be aware of the products and what those products actually mean and the services that they offer. We're also working with the Savings-Led Microfinance Network of Zambia. This is a grouping that brings together the players that are supporting the mobilization of various savings groups to be able to undertake what are called savings group promotion. So again, we supporting this network to be able to be the mouthpiece for the members, and also to be able to bring some standards in the sector. Okay. At the micro level, we have various initiatives that we have undertaken. Basically just grouped them in three. We're working with the savings groups, promoters, basically linking these savings groups to various financial service providers. Why is this important? We are aware that a lot of savings groups that are operating in the country, but basically have two major challenges that they face. One is that as the savings groups grow, the amount of resources that they actually mobilize increases, and it becomes a security risk for them to keep that money in the boxes that they use. These boxes are basically metal boxes which the treasurer of the group takes home and puts under the bed and then brings it back for the next meeting. If the amounts of money increase to 50,000, 200,000 kwacha, it becomes a security risk. Secondly, the groups, members of these groups run businesses, and as the businesses grow, you find that some members of a group would want to have access to a little bit more money than what is actually in the box. So one way of solving that problem is to link that group to a financial institution which have more resources. So the group can then borrow money from a bank or a cooperative and bring that money and put it in the box. So that makes it possible for all the members of that group who need more money than is available to be able to access and to be able to grow their businesses. The second group is a technology group, where we are basically calling it the agents and mobile banking a window. Under this window, we are doing digitization. So digitization of savings groups. So instead of the groups putting money in the boxes, they are using electronic means. So they use the phone to be able to save and also to be able to get credit from the group. We're also working with off-grid home energy service providers. These are solar energy companies that are providing resources in terms of home energy products, water pumps to smallholder farmers. We're also working with various financial service providers, banks and others, in supporting them to develop mobile banking platforms. These platforms are now linking smallholder farmers to the financial service provider, so that instead of the players that are intervening in this sector having to go around with the money to pay the smallholder farmer, be it in the dairy industry, the cotton industry, or horticulture, these farmers are already linked to the bank, and all they need to do is to deliver their produce, and then the bank immediately is aware that somebody has delivered tomatoes, somebody has delivered milk, and their account is credited, and then that farmer can go at their own time to the bank. In this case, if it's in a rural area, you might go to an ATM and be able to get the money at a time that you want it. This also teaches you, helps you to develop a habit of saving, because then you are not, you don't have to draw all the money for that sale that you have made. If you have done a 200 kwacha sale, you might need only 100 kwacha at that point, and that's what you draw. So the 100 kwacha becomes a saving, and you develop a saving habit, and you develop a record, and that is called a credit record. That's what the banks want. Next time you want to engage the bank directly, they'll be asking for a credit record, and you can develop it through these mobile banking platforms. We're also supporting various players to come up with new insurance products, for example, for savings groups, so that instead of using this, what is called the social fund for these groups to help somebody who's got a funeral or help somebody who needs school fees, you actually develop a product so that they have access to more products that insurance companies offer. We're also working with some players that are helping in terms of land tenure documentation. One of the issues around credit is that our colleagues in the rural areas do not have, are not able to provide collateral because they don't have titled land. But there are companies that we're working with that are able to give some form of title that can be used by a bank. We're also looking at developing new loan products for savings groups, so that the commercial banks can actually engage directly with a savings group and use the system that has been proven as security, instead of looking for traditional security, therefore inhibiting other people from accessing that fund. If we move on to the next slide, we're just showing you the number of projects that we have worked with so far under the savings group, which is a CBFI linkages window. We have 11 projects that we've supported. Under the agents and mobile banking window, we have 22. The rural finance and equity innovation window, which is where we are looking at developing or researching on new products, we have 10. So altogether, we've done 43. We can move to the next slide. So we thought we talk about the current challenges, which is really around COVID and how this has impacted on the sector. We are aware that the smallholder sector, as Louis mentioned, is a challenging sector. We know that even before COVID, there are not many players. I think Louis did mention that although we have a huge portfolio of finances that has gone to the agriculture sector in this country, that only goes to a few commercial farmers. The large part of this country in terms of farmers are smallholder farmers, and they don't have access to that resource even before COVID. Now imagine with COVID, this has even become worse. So we're looking at a few challenges. On the demand side, we have reduced demand by rural consumers for non-essential services. We also have a general slowdown on overall demand as consumer spending power has decreased, because in terms of commercial activities, there's been a reduction because of the various measures that are taken. So the spending power is not there. Smallholder farmers are also changing or delaying their planting due to uncertainty of the pandemic. We've had an increased use of digital financial services in terms of mobile money, but I think we have had a reduction in terms of the actual remittances that people are sending across the various platforms, again, because of the reason that there's been a slowdown in terms of consumption and also activities due to the various measures that have been taken. This obviously goes to reduce the commissions that the small agents are able to make, which is actually their livelihood. So on the other hand, there's been an increase in terms of the usage, but not getting as much money because of the lower levels that are being sent across or received. Then we also have a reduction in terms of the ability by a rural woman in terms of their income because of the closure of markets, closure of schools, and also a special group called the service groups. The way the groups conduct their business is that they actually meet around some premises, discuss, save money, and be able to get a loan. But this mode of meeting has been curtailed because of the COVID issues. Okay. On the supply side, we have also the businesses who are unable to repay loans because obviously the demand has gone down. And we are talking about small businesses, people that are doing hair salons, people that are buying and selling. So for some of them who have small little assets, they have no choice but to sell those assets and be able to survive. We also have travel restrictions that have made wholesalers more expensive or impossible to actually get. We also have a reduction in terms of the last mile inputs of delivery of inputs because of restrictions in travel. And smallholder farmers face marketing challenges due to travel restrictions. What are some of the solutions or the responses? The government has come up with the stimulus package for banks and other FSPs. We also have tax reductions and reductions in the monetary policy. And we have partners that have responded, including the ADB. IFAD has a poor stimulus package, and the World Bank also has some package. We are thinking, we have our thinking caps on and looking at how else we can help. And So explorations are around to see whether it is possible to actually provide specific stimulus packages for MFIs and also tier 2, 3, and 4 FSPs, and also to develop specific stimulus packages for specific sectors, and probably help try and rationalize the resources that we already have with institutions like CEC and DBZ. I think DBZ already launched a package of 100 million kwacha last week. So there are some responses that the government has come up with to try and support the sector during this COVID-19 situation. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have had a comprehensive view of RUFEB. We have RUFEB as a GRZ initiative at a macro, meso, and micro level. There are various partnerships that have been put in place by RUFEB to identify policy and legislative opportunities, regulate the market, and create efficiency in infrastructure and institutional capacity, as well as enhance delivery to the smallholder on the ground. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm aware that we only have 10 minutes to go, and so we may not be able to take a number of questions, but I'll just ask, based on the various questions that we've seen coming through on the platform, thank you very much for your questions. We'll make sure that somebody replies to each of them, but I'll ask each of the participants to, in 1 minute, summarize how we can improve and enhance on the opportunities and resolve the challenges so that we can have the impact that we're looking for. I'll start with Mr. Patrick Chibamulilo from JICA. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should start by saying that as JICA, we have some activities that respond to some of the challenges in the sector. We train farmers. We also have some irrigation support, which mitigate the risk, and also try to diversify the agriculture by promoting rice production. And I would also like to mention that there are several opportunities that in our face. We shouldn't lose hope as Zambians in getting finance. We have a number of the cases that have been mentioned, the commercial banks, investors, venture capital can be one of them, where people can put in equity versus land, and then you can outgrow schemes. Warehouse receipt system, whereby you can put your maize or whatever grains in some warehouse which is certified, and then you can borrow against that to mitigate the issues of collateral. We have, we should look outside the box, ICT, mobile money, so you can get some money from those operators. Nasova is one of them from Airtel. You have, we should also have what we call to strengthen the forgotten half of finance, which is savings. Finance is both savings and credit. Sometimes we talk too much about credit. Farmers should look at farmers and other players, especially farmers, should look at maybe putting some savings a bit for a rainy day to be part of their financing of different activities. I hope my 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We'll hand over to Mr. Louis Bangwe to just summarize in 1 minute.
Thank you, facilitator. Even as government and development partners are working out mechanisms, to de-risk lending to agriculture through guarantees and other innovative products, I think we need to see more innovation from the bank, the financial lending institutions also to come forward and develop innovative loan products. I think they tend to over-depend on traditional sources of income, and they are not willing to go forward and identify new enterprises where they could make money and work with the producers and the entrepreneurs. So it should not be on the burden of the entrepreneur to develop a bankable proposal, but they should work together with the financial institutions. On the part of farmers, I think we need to see more efforts to improve productivity and to diversify into profitable products to encourage lenders to come forward. And lastly, I think the government and the development partners should focus on improving rural public infrastructure in terms of communication to facilitate commerce and trade. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Mike Mbulo from RUFEP in 1 minute.
Thanks, Mkwandi. I think from RUFEP, we are sending a message that the smallholder farmer is a sophisticated being, and financial service providers need to be innovative, as Louis said, to be able to be of use to these smallholder farmers. Financial service providers should look to technology in terms of digital financial services, and also be able to use existing institutions. In this case, we have the savings groups that have mushroomed around the country. These savings groups actually work. So the FSPs can be able to use the institutions that are already available. In terms of geography, you don't have to go all over the country. These institutions are there. You can engage with them and be able to reach out to the smallholder farmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mbulo. Thank you all. And there you have it. We have had the presentations through and we are engaging. We'll continue to answer the questions. It's something that we all need to participate in. There's no particular sector that can do it alone. We all have to come together to address the challenges and build on the opportunities to deliver for agric in Zambia. Over to you, Namkolo, to finalize and close out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for everybody for joining us for the very informative workshop. I would like to thank our speakers, Mr. Patrick Shimabulilo, Mr. Louis Bangwe, Mr. Mike Mbulo, and our facilitator, Ms. Chibesakunda. Participants are kindly urged to go to the agenda on Hoover and participate in the Hoover Workshop evaluation polls. My name is Namkolo Mangala, and I have been your host for this workshop. I thank you once more.